I travel to my hotel in an Uber. My wife doesn't cook anymore. Everything comes via DoorDash. DoorDash, not Jordash. So we're feeling this in a great way in our personal lives, but certainly in a significant way in our professional lives as destination marketers. And I think there are some real great opportunities for us to take advantage of. We have three distinguished panel members who have a lot of experience in this area. The first being Carl Shepard, Ashwin Kamlami, and my good friend Jeff Duncan. The way things are going to work today, you're going to hear mini presentations followed by Q&A. So we're going to go down the line, 1, 2, 3. This sharing economy presentation also requires you to share your thoughts, your questions, your experience with us. And I understand we are going to have mics set up, so be ready, take some notes, and be ready to fire some questions at us, okay? All right, first up is Carl Shepard. Carl will be talking to us about lessons learned by the rise of sharing economy and how the sharing economy has changed or redefined industries. Think about Uber, Marriott, DoorDash, as I just mentioned, and how sharing economy companies become marketplaces driven by the passion to solve a problem, and how they increase competition in ways both fair and unfair by relying on technology to organize what was previously thought to be unorganizable. Carl is a veteran of the sharing economy, semi-retired, I'm not sure what that means, serial internet entrepreneur, I know what that means. Shepard co-founded HomeAway in 2005, which was one of the first sharing economy-based companies. As Chief Strategic and Development Officer, he was the architect of the company's acquisition strategy, negotiating and closing 22 acquisitions and investments, and he also served on the board of directors until the company's sale to Expedia. Please join me in welcoming Carl Shepard.
Thanks, Rich. I haven't done this in a while. So this is all a new learning experience. I have to go back and actually get my glasses. So let's see which one of these little puppies moves it along. Okay. As the co-founder of HomeAway, which is the company that took vacation rentals mainstream, I haven't always been warmly received by direct marketing organizations and CVBs and hotels. But I have, as a member of probably the oldest member of the sharing economy movement, I've had a pretty good seat on a very fast-moving train. So what I'm going to do today is talk about the lessons I've learned, but I'm going to use the vacation rental industry as a backdrop for that, so you can see that what the power of these sharing-based tech marketplaces have to really organize highly fragmented suppliers and via shared technology. So in less than the 10 years that we were running HomeAway before we sold it to Expedia, we saw the marketplace grow from only 7% of travelers had stayed in a vacation home in 2004, and 40% stayed in there in 2005. And I'm hoping now that I can get this. I don't see where the slides are. This is not working. I've got red dots.
Maybe a song while we wait.
Okay, this one right here? Okay, all right. There we go. Okay. So when I retired from HomeAway a couple of years ago, we sold it to Expedia. It was predominantly pure vacation rentals, i.e. second homes that were used by the owners and occasionally rented to the public, as opposed to an Airbnb, which is predominantly primary homes which are rented by the occupants, whether they own it or not. The overlap of Airbnb and HomeAway is quite small. People think it's larger than it is. It's only today in 2017 about 15%. So that means that between the two companies, there are more than 3 million unique homes available online. Focusrite puts that number at over 6 million. This, of course, dwarfs the number of 40,000, which was the number of listings we had on the February 1st, 2005, when we formed HomeAway. These properties are all part of what we call the shared economy, and these two companies, Airbnb and HomeAway, are quite large. In 2005, not very many people would have predicted that a sharing economy-based company, we didn't even know that word yet, would outpace the growth of the hotel industry over the next 10 years. Yet two companies have done that. And these two companies have had pretty profound impacts on cities and the travel industry. As I say, we serve over 3 million people who rent their space to others. And between HomeAway and Airbnb, they will book $30 billion in bookings in 2017. They have to change the way travelers experience your cities. And while cities like my own hometown of Austin, Texas, fight Airbnb and HomeAway and Uber and Lyft, those services have completely changed the way consumers expect to experience the city, and they've had profound impacts on both of those towns. Uber and Lyft have actually changed the name of the industry from the cab industry to the ride-sharing industry. And what we're seeing is the final frontier of sharing economy companies, which is anytime there are largely, highly fragmented marketplaces that are coming together using a shared technology, that we see now that we're beginning to see it in other activities, which we'll talk about towards the end of the talk. I always hated the phrase alternative lodging because I really wondered who gets to decide what's alternative. I'm not a fan of words that make us versus them. And it's alternative lodging, kind of like alternative facts, always conveys to me something that is missing, is just a little off. And it turns out that to travel analysts, lots of things were alternative. Vacation rentals, bed and breakfasts, pensions, boutiques, private rooms, primary homes, hostels, all of those were called alternative. And as you can see from these two numbers, in 2016, there were 187,000 hotels, according to STR Global, and there were 6.1 million vacation homes that were rentable to the public. So I ask you, which one of those is alternative in that context? So the very first thing I would point out is that you can't ignore in the sharing economy the underlying trends. That's what we learned. The trends took HomeAway and Airbnb up to be what they are today. Trends is what made Uber and Lyft grow. And we can't ignore the underlying trends in the sharing economy. Second one I'd like to point out that I've learned is that it's very personal. Simply put, Brian Sharples and I started HomeAway because we were just pissed off about how hard it was to find and book a vacation home. Vacation homes are the only way my wife and I were able to travel. We had 3 kids very far apart in ages, and it wasn't very much of a vacation for us if the baby was in our hotel room, and we really couldn't be sure that he'd be alive the next morning if we put him in the room with his brothers. So we had to have 3 bedrooms. And because we were so horrible at family planning, we needed the ability to feed a baby at 6:45 every morning without a trip to a restaurant for about 15 years. That gets you to where you love vacation homes very quickly. So when you have this sort of situation in your life, there's just not a hotel that's going to work for you. And I set out with Brian to figure out how in the world we were going to make this easy for people to do. Other passion. Airbnb was not founded because Brian Chesky had a vision that someday he would be a billionaire, which he is. It was because he and Joe Gebbia actually needed to pay the rent. He tells this story a lot, and it's absolutely true. He rented his bed, his couch, and his floor during the Democratic National Convention in San Francisco, and that was the only way he and Joe were able to make rent that month. Uber was really founded by Garrett Camp, who wanted to take black cars for the same price as a cab. Now, this illustrates that the personal problem you're trying to solve doesn't particularly have to be a noble one. It's just a problem that you experience. So people who have found the sharing economies companies have done so because they have a passion, they have a personal problem, and it's something that they want to solve. The next lesson that I learned over the years is that sharing economy companies are very asset light. Neither HomeAway or Airbnb actually own or license the names to the properties that they represent. Anyone can sign up, enabling HomeAway to add inventory at rates that was unprecedented in 2005 to 2010. 40,000 houses to over 1.1 million. If we had had to find those houses and send out a sales force, we simply couldn't have done it. If you think about Uber and Lyft, if they had to find, buy, service, and clean the cars that they have, much less actually hire all the drivers, full-time, part-time, sometimes, they would collapse under their own weight. So none of these companies actually employ the people that provide the final service. The primary asset of a sharing economy company remains technology. And the fourth lesson is that technology is required to scale. Scaling is everything in a sharing economy business. Remember, you are organizing industries that are highly fragmented. 6.1 million people who have vacation homes. The extraordinary number of drivers that Uber and Lyft have in each city. Organizing that has to be done in a way that couldn't be done in traditional means. It can only be done through technologies. But all the people have in those groups, all in that little segment of the economy, have definable common needs, and they have another problem. They can't create an individual brand. It's almost impossible for an individual vacation home to establish a brand. It's practically impossible for a large property manager in Breckenridge, Colorado, to establish a brand that's going to drive traffic to their company. They don't have the benefit of having names like Hilton and Marriott to drive people to them. So technology becomes the organizing principle, not just the driving force. The fifth rule is rules. We don't need no stinking rules in the sharing economy. And this is something that really took me by surprise when I started HomeAway. One of the charms of being completely new to an industry, and neither Brian Sharples nor I knew anything about the vacation rental industry except we like to stay in them. We didn't know how the industry worked. Neither of us had ever worked in travel. None of us knew anything about DMOs and CVVs. We didn't know anything, so therefore we were able to create something that was independent of that. And one of the things we were independent of was state, local, and national regulation. We didn't allow the fact that the homes we were listing weren't actually licensed to do business to keep us from listing those properties on our sites. Neither did Airbnb. Uber is the most famous in this situation for asking for forgiveness rather than permission. They go into markets, they start operating, and then they ask for permission to be there. When the permission is withheld, like it was in my hometown of Austin and now the entire country of Denmark, Uber and Lyft simply leave. There's too much of a green field in the sharing economy right now in rideshare for them to waste time trying to get something legal in any particular market. They just leave. This makes industry leaders and industry folks really angry, the people who are actually rule followers. But it doesn't seem to matter a whit to millennials, and who are more likely to see the rule is stupid in the first place, and therefore it's almost the company's obligation to ignore it. So most sharing economy companies that are large today were built before and became big before governments even started trying to regulate them, and it's not going well. Next to the last thing that is true in all sharing economy companies is that nimble rule breakers win by creating marketplaces and not franchises. Marketplaces balance supply and demand. They serve two customers, the buyer and the seller, at all times. And they grow via what we call the virtuous circle. I can talk about this from HomeAway's perspective. In our case, new listings attracted more travelers attracted more listings, and HomeAway grew at almost geometric progressions in traffic and listings over a 10-year period, simply because people were finding us. The network effect is what it's called, and it's essential to all sharing economy companies. The balance of supply and demand has to be maintained or the marketplace becomes efficient. Whenever there's a hole in one particular place in the world, the market fills that hole. If we have more demand on HomeAway in Boca Raton, Florida than we have properties, the properties would come and we all would profit from that. Paradoxically, we figured out about 30 years into running HomeAway that inquiries and bookings grew fastest in those geographic locations where we had the highest listing counts. And the final thing that I've learned is that marketplaces are worldwide. HomeAway was global from the first day. It was international on the day it was born. We had offices in 2 countries on the day we were formed. Today it has offices in 9 countries and listings in more than 200 countries. And that's because travel is a global industry, and we therefore had to be global from the first day. We had to have inventory where people came to look, and that inventory was something that came from the Virtuous Circle. We could never have succeeded if we'd had to have a sales force. HomeAway didn't hire its first salesperson until we were 6 years old to actually go out and organize and sell listings for us. We had found a problem that was so basic, and we solved it with such an easy answer that it became universal and people could find us. Airbnb's done the same thing. Uber has done that. So has Lyft. So has Favor. So has Thumbtack. So have lots of sharing economy companies. This is how these businesses grow from being worldwide and being able to satisfy a customer no matter where they are. It drives me to want to share this anecdote with you. My 2 oldest children live in San Francisco now. And every time they come home to visit me, I have to remind them, remember, Connor, you can't get an Uber in Austin. To which Connor always replies, yes, you do live in a third world country. There are many places that the sharing economy has not taken place and taken hold yet, and I think that they will. The first area that's ripe for it is a company, is an activity group that are activities and tours that people want to take while they're on vacation, but also that people want to experience in market when they live there. These are perfectly suited to the gig economy, and because just like an Uber driver and an Airbnb host, an individual can determine what he wants to do, when he wants to do it, how often he wants to go, how many people he wants to take. And the sharing economy, a service, can let that occur. The next one that I'm finding very interesting, we already see the activities in cars and buses and RVs and camps, but foodie experiences are pretty interesting. People are now creating places where you can go online. You can find people who will cook for you when you go on vacation. But a twist on that is a friend of mine yesterday shared with another friend who was going to Shanghai the place they could go to find a cook who would serve a 10-course meal for 5 of her friends in an amazing apartment in Shanghai overlooking the Bund. And that was done, booked and organized completely online. So I believe that in the next 5 or 6 years, we'll all be experiencing food in a different way when we travel, or even in our own homes. You'll be able to have people come and cook in your house. You'll be able to have experience 3 or 4 different cuisines, local cuisines in your vacation rental, and we're pretty excited about that. There are already 2 sites out there competing to provide pet vacations because, millennials believe they have pet children, so why the hell not give the pet children a vacation? And that's something that is being organized right now, and people are beginning to self-organize and self-direct around providing pet sitting services, but really my grand dog Baylor, who's the San Francisco dog, was offered a pet massage at his last stay when he was in San Francisco. He was asked whether or not he needed 3 or 4 massages during his 7-day stay. Go figure. So that's what I've learned by being a part of this industry for the last few years, and I just want to repeat them before I get off the stage. And the first one is never ignore trends. Trends are going to tell you where the opportunities are going to lie. If you're going to start a sharing economy business, remember this is personal. You're solving your problem and you're solving the problem of hopefully tens and thousands and hopefully even millions of other people. You've got to be asset light. You can't approach these businesses by coming up and saying you're going to organize the world by calling them all on the phone or showing up at their door. That's not going to work in a sharing economy business. Technology is everything. You're going to need to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. And you're going to be creating marketplaces, not franchises. And those marketplaces are going to end up being global. So that's what I've learned over the next few years, and I look forward to taking some questions after the other panelists are done.
Thank you, Carl. That was a great kickoff, great way to set the stage for us. Next up is Ashwin. Ashwin's going to talk to us about his company Cognitive and their goal to tap into demand for travel through partnerships with major consumer brands. Ashwin's presentation will ask DMOs to think about a world where they no longer have to throw money at the OTAs or search engines to try and get noticed in a crowded and inefficient marketplace. Ashwin started out consulting with Accenture and PricewaterhouseCoopers before completing his Master's of Management and Hospitality at Cornell. Nice job. He started Regatta Travel Solutions in 2010 with the goal of helping hotels and DMOs increase their direct online booking volume through innovative technology. After quickly growing the company's hotel and DMO portfolio, Regatta Travel Solutions was acquired by Cognitive Corporation just this last August. Ashwin's role as Cognitive is to recruit hotel chains and DMOs to participate in collaborative travel commerce networks and to lead global product innovation for the company. Please join me in welcoming Ashwin.
Thank you. This on? All right, perfect. Can you guys hear me? All right, great. First of all, I just want to thank SimpleView for inviting me to participate in this panel. When I first came to the SimpleView Summit, I think it was 2012, we literally had 3 people in the company, and we had just started. The company was started with no funding, and to be up here on the stage with these esteemed gentlemen and talking to all of you is really an honor. So just, and it's really thanks to all of you for getting us to where we are. We now work with 50 DMOs, and we love the industry, and we're hoping to significantly grow in this space. I see Mark right there. He was our first US DMO visit Seattle. All right, so I'm not going to talk too much about the sharing economy. In fact, that's probably the last time I'm going to say sharing economy in this presentation. I think these 2 gentlemen will have that covered pretty well. I'd like to talk to you more specifically about DMOs and how booking technology has evolved and what I think is going to happen in the future, okay? So believe it or not, there was a time when DMOs were an important source of reservations for their customers, okay, for their partners and their suppliers in a destination. So if you think back to before Expedia and TripAdvisor and frankly the internet, many consumers would go into a visitor center or call a DMO and ask for advice about where to stay. And they'd even ask the DMO to make a reservation for them. And I know there are DMOs here in the room that in fact had call centers of people that were there to make reservations for people coming to their destination. So how did that change? You know, what happened? Well, the internet came along, and you had these search engines, OTAs, review sites, suddenly make all this information about the destination completely easily accessible to the consumer that needed it instantly, right? Now let me guess, a lot of you guys probably spend a lot of your budget with these types of companies, search engines, review sites, and OTAs, because in this economy, the owner of the data is king. And so we got ourselves in a situation where the companies that owned the data for consumers who were looking to travel now held the keys to the castle. And so they were able to come to the DMO and say, hey, you know what? I've now created these destination pages on my website, and you're going to need to pay for that if you want to get access to my consumers, right? Or you could go to an OTA and buy banners to place and hopefully drive more people to your destination. Or you could, of course, buy keywords in Google, and therefore you could reach their consumer audience. But all these companies got between the DMO and the consumer, and now you became a source of revenue for them, right? Now, meanwhile, all of your stakeholders, your hotels, attractions, and restaurants are saying, hey, what have you done for me lately, right? How come I'm not getting bookings from you? In fact, we had dinner with a DMO last night, and she said to us, you know, I have hotels coming to me and saying, you guys should be producing 30% of my occupancy. That's a pretty tall order, right? And we talked about how many taxes are collected and how much percentage of that tax the DMO gets. When you compare that to the budgets of Expedia and the other companies out there, it's pretty minuscule. So it's a pretty high expectation to expect the DMO to actually deliver on that type of expectation. So when we talk to DMOs about, booking engines and how, they should play a role in, sending bookings to the hotels, this is quite often the type of reaction we get. You know what? I'm just going to focus on building awareness for my destination. This really shouldn't be the DMO's job anymore. Let the OTAs handle it. They're really good at it. They've got all the data anyway. And you know what? Customers just don't like booking on DMO sites. Well, I don't buy that. I just think that we haven't put the DMO brand in front of the consumer when they're actually ready to book something. So this comment about, DMOs are at the top of the funnel, well, that's probably true, but why couldn't we change that? So that's something that actually at Regatta, I'm not going to talk too much about this, but at Regatta we did pretty well. So we actually took the DMO brands, and here's an example of Visit Knoxville, and put them right in front of the consumer in the travel search engines, right? So this customer is coming to the destination, and now they're deciding, where do I want to stay and how am I going to book? And we're making Visit Knoxville an option for them to book right next to the OTAs. This is an example of Visit Barbados. So this is Google. They've searched for a hotel in Barbados. They're right next to Expedia and Booking.com and everybody else. What we then did is bring them into an engine that had a very flexible way of booking, and we were able to give the customer ways to book that no other site was able to give them. So that's all I'm really going to say about that. In terms of special events, we could actually create engines just for one specific event. Now, what all this did was it allowed us to capture data. And we were able to go to the DMOs and say, look, here are all the email addresses of everybody that booked with you. And here are all the people that came to this event. Now you can go out and try to attract them back to the destination. Now, why is that important? We had some really good success stories. Not all of them were success stories, but here's one example of the U.S. Virgin Islands, where in the last 5 months, we booked over $715,000 for about 30 hotels. And that's a lot of consumer data that this DMO now currently has. But this brings me to my point, which is, why couldn't that be 2 million, or 3 million, or 4 million? Well, the reason is because we're out there competing for that data the same way everybody else is, right? We're trying to get some funds from the DMO, and we're saying, listen, give us some funds. We're going to go out there and invest that into Google and TripAdvisor, and just like everybody else who wants to start up a travel site, and we're going to compete for those consumers on behalf of the DMO. Well, that's a really good result, but I have to ask myself, what if we didn't have to buy that access? What if we had access to our own consumers? Well, that's a very difficult thing to do in today's day and age, right? Because today, consumers who want to book travel think about going to certain websites, right? Could be TripAdvisor, Expedia, could be OTA. There's certain brands that have monopolized the online travel space, and those are the ones that consumers think about going to. And they don't share any of that data, with DMOs or hotels. That's their data, which allows them to monetize it. So what if there was a different way to access that same consumer data? So as a company, we're building alliances with credit card companies, cell phone companies, supermarkets, banks, airlines, because all these companies are looking to build more loyalty with their customers. And by offering their customers the ability to book travel and earn more points, for example, if you're a member of a supermarket chain, and you could earn points toward your next grocery shopping experience by booking travel through this loyalty program, they see the value in that. So we're calling this the collaborative network. Why? Because we want to collaborate with these brands to incentivize people to travel. What this allows us to do is to gain access to people's shopping habits, their tendencies, their profiles, and build a network of consumers, and then open that up for access to DMOs and to hotel companies. So maybe that's my angle on the sharing aspect of this presentation. Maybe data should be openly shared and not held hostage and then sold, right? So imagine what you could do if there was a network of consumers and you could say, look, the profile of the customer or the traveler that comes to my destination looks like this. Now, can you guys help me profile match this type of consumer, and let's go to all these brands and see if we can promote my destination to this audience? That's a very different way of thinking about how a DMO could go out and really attract more visitation. So when thinking about how DMOs actually fit into this collaborative network schema, we've had several different ideas that we're throwing around. Of course, DMOs could act like hotel groups and promote themselves to this group of travelers, but maybe DMOs could have their own loyalty programs. In fact, we're talking to a large region right now that gets a lot of repeat visitation, and we're saying, look, guys, why don't we create a loyalty program for your region? And imagine if, in order to get these points toward future travel or future purchases in their next visit, they'd have to book through you. And whatever revenue comes out of that booking, we can actually share with you guys, and it actually becomes a real revenue stream. So we've had some DMOs come and say, look, we're interested in doing bookings on our site, but we want to make money from that, right? Well, that's usually a losing battle, because in today's market, you've got to spend so much money to go out and attract that visitor to your site that there's no way to make that money back and actually make a profit from it. But what if you didn't actually have to buy that access anymore? So in order to accomplish this, Kognitiv has acquired several different companies. Regatta was one of them. We've acquired a meta-search platform. We've acquired a dynamic packaging system. But these are all best-of-breed travel technologies, because if we're going to attract this audience to a marketplace where DMOs and hotel groups are trying to incentivize people to book, that booking experience has got to be the best available. It can't be just as good as the others out there. It's got to be much better. Now, we don't have an attractions platform, and so, as you heard this morning from Ryan, we've created an alliance with SimpleView and Once There, because Once There are the experts in tour and attraction and ticketing services. So I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to pass it on to the next speaker. Great, thanks.
All right, last but not least, we have our good friend Jeff Duncan from MeetingMax here. Just going to share his thoughts and experiences with regard to the sharing economy's effect on room blocks. He proposes that events like South by Southwest, World Cup in Brazil, and the Super Bowl in San Francisco were all more successful by partnering with Airbnb, while at the same time, hotels benefiting from their participation in the marketplace. Jeff Duncan has been in the tourism and travel business for 20 years. He's president and CEO of MeetingMax, the largest provider of online group reservations technology in Canada, annually processing millions in hotel transactions through its software. Jeff is always looking for ways to push the event tech space forward. Jeff is a 40 under 40 winner. He's really good at being Canadian. He's an active public speaker and travels the globe looking for the next disruption in the travel and hotel booking space. Please help me welcome Jeff Duncan.
So is that even a thing, being really good at being Canadian?
If it is, you are.
Is this
Yeah.
where I apologize?
Yes, yes.
I love the fact that our two speakers that just came up have these great slide decks, and clearly they put a lot of thought and effort and energy into it. And I have a white piece of paper. So I think personally that Rich is trying to punish me for coming with a piece of paper, and that's why he put me last. It's either that or he's jealous of my socks, so I don't know which. Yeah, if it has to do with socks, I don't know how Ashwin fits into the overall picture. We're gonna, and like Rich said, that I'm gonna spend some time talking about, for sure, the industry impact on the sharing economy, or the sharing economy's impact on the overall industry that we're all living and breathing in. With that said, I want to spend some time talking about why the sharing economy works. And I think that that's important first, to understand the fundamentals of why the sharing economy is as successful as it is. There is, I guess, the whole premise on why the sharing economy is working is the first thing you've got underutilized assets. You've got assets that people have that aren't being utilized, and you've got people that need those assets. And that's really the premise of it. Before there was technology, the sharing economy still existed. It's just technology has allowed the sharing economy to blossom. And technology has taken over that barrier to entry for organizations and individuals to be able to collaborate in this economy. You know, when we're talking about the monetization of assets, I often use the example of a drill. We talk about, you know, everyone in this room who has a drill to put up their hand. You're looking at probably 3/4 of the room that have a drill. So you're looking at the other 1/4 of the room that doesn't own a drill. Well, does that mean that they're never going to need to drill? They're never going to need to utilize a drill? And the answer is no. So they're eventually going to have to get a drill. But when you've got 3/4 of the audience who already have a drill, how much time is that drill actually being utilized? And so statistics have shown that from the point that the drill has been manufactured and put into a box and goes to the consumer to plug in and charge up and start using, that a drill actually in its entire life cycle gets used for 18 minutes. So 18 minutes is what that drill, the whole life cycle from when it gets into the hand of the consumer to when it gets to the landfill. So when you have an asset like a drill that's sitting on 3/4 of the people's shelves, you've got the other 1/4 of the people who will need to utilize a drill at some point in their life. That's why, again, the sharing economy is blossoming. The next thing is it creates less waste. I mean, when you've got a drill that's being utilized for only 18 minutes through its entire life cycle, I would hedge to bet that you could probably get a lot more life cycle than 18 minutes out of a drill. And by having someone who has a drill in their hand to someone who doesn't have a drill in their hand, that creates less waste because they ultimately don't have to go and purchase an item. And the last thing is it really taps into this human need to create and build community. We're seeing a big shift right now from the whole business to consumer. We're seeing this whole new industry of consumer to consumer, that it's no longer the case where someone who wants something needs to go to the corporation in order to procure what they require. It's now become a consumer to consumer scenario, which has been, you know, fundamental and a big change and big shift in the overall market. So let's just talk about some fun ways that we can all embrace the sharing economy before we dive into the concepts of how this is, and the sharing economy is disrupting our industry in terms of accommodation. So the first one is, we should all be using TaskRabbit. TaskRabbit is a way to get rid of mundane tasks, routine tasks that you don't want to be doing, that you shouldn't be doing, deliveries, pickups. TaskRabbit is absolutely huge. My next one is Fiverr. Who here is familiar with Fiverr? Can you put up your hand? Okay, so maybe like 10% of the audience. Fiverr are all the things that people will do for $5. I am telling you, it's remarkable to see what people are willing to do for $5. Just before I got up here, I went onto Fiverr to find the 4 strangest things that you can procure on Fiverr. Number 1, this person will sing and dance to any song wearing a hot dog costume, video it and send it to you in HD for $5. Number 2, this person will write a short message for you using Alphagetti on a piece of toast, photograph it, and send it to you. Number 3, this person will be your Facebook girlfriend for 1 week for $5. And my favorite is this person will break up with your girlfriend or boyfriend for you for $5. So the use of Fiverr is wide, and I encourage you to go in and explore because it's amazing to see this whole concept of underutilized assets. This poor guy has a hot dog costume in his closet. Underutilized asset. You find some reason why you want him to be singing a song, and that's how the sharing economy functions. Next is talk about utilizing your asset of conference room or shared workspace or event space This open space has become a huge concept to be able to leverage underutilized assets, your meeting space or your office, in order to have someone who needs to access that. And the last thing we should all be looking at is a website called Etsy, E-T-S-Y. Etsy is all about local artisans, local crafts. From a destinations perspective, this is huge. When you've got famil groups coming in, when you've got visitors into the city, visitors into your visitor centers, Etsy is a huge one. Instead of providing trinkets or swag that are made in China, how about actually having something that's been created in your community that's supporting your local artisans? So there's some fun ways to utilize the sharing economy. And now we can kind of talk about how this all breaks into the business of room blocks. And like Rich had mentioned, the business of room blocks is near and dear to my heart. I mean, our business is all about booking in the room block. And so when there's an effect and there's disruption, this is something that we know we have to keep our finger on the pulse of really tightly. There's pros and cons to the sharing economy, and I know that we can probably all come up with a ton of cons. For sure, having unregulated taxes. You know, we were talking earlier at lunch today about the fact that, hey, if you're going to make it illegal, it's going to create some issues. If you're going to have the sharing economy as illegal and operate illegally without having the proper policies and regulations and laws in place, then it creates an issue. It disrupts economic impact tracking for all of us. We're trying to determine what the economic impact of a group that's coming to our destination is, and it's impossible to track at this point in time without having, we can definitely track the individuals that are coming in, booking in through the block. That's easy to track through housing software from the hotels. But it becomes a lot more difficult to be able to nail down, are these people coming into the destination? Are they bringing spouses? Are they coming in with children? It's one more layer of information that you don't necessarily have. And the last is there really is no control over the guest experience at this point. We all knew as we rolled up to the JW what to expect. We understood generally that the lobby would be, when we pulled up, there would be a valet or someone to help us with our luggage. There would be someone at the front desk because it would be manned 24/7. We knew what to expect in terms of bedding. We knew what the amenities were going to look like. We knew that this is going to be a consistent theme across all the JWs, and that's one of the powers to have a consistent brand and theme. Unfortunately, with the sharing economy at this point, it's become a little less predictable. And short of photos that are on the websites of Airbnb and HomeAway and VRBO, it is much more difficult to put your finger on exactly what that guest is going to experience. But as Rich mentioned, there are a ton of pros. There's a ton of advantages to this. And he had indicated, I mean, we talk about South by Southwest. South by Southwest, with 400,000 visitors that come into the city, cannot support that quantity of, or that size of event for the destination size. There's not enough hotel rooms to be able to deal with that many people. So in fact, by having the sharing economy in place, having Airbnb as available and heavily booked, South by Southwest succeeds because of Airbnb. It succeeds greater due to the fact that the sharing economy is there. In fact, I'll take it one step further and talk about how the hotels benefit from having Airbnb in place. Since Airbnb is available, South by Southwest can continue to be a larger program with more people. With more people, there's more demand on the actual rooms that are in the destination, and the average daily rates for South by Southwest has continued to increase year over year due to the fact that the event is as successful as it is. And then World Cup. I mean, this was huge for Brazil as a destination and as a country to say we cannot support an event this size in our country. And so Brazil reached out to Airbnb and said, we need you in our country. And they found 120,000 guests accommodations during the course of the World Cup. So clearly, without the sharing economy and without Airbnb, the event could not have succeeded to its same extent. So, you know, other benefits, I mean, you know, we need to get down to the fact that there is this is not going away. And I think one of the things that as an industry we struggle with, and we talked about this at lunch as well, one of the problems is that we as an industry have a tendency to put our head in the sand. And we have a tendency to, it's not that we think that it's going away, it's just a lot easier to not deal with it and hope that maybe something will get better, even though in the back of our head we know that it's not. This is not going away. We need to be able to position ourselves better, and we need to put ourselves in a position where we have the ability to not just benefit from, but help push along the sharing economy. And that's really where we're at today with this industry and the sharing economy. We need to have it fully embraced. We need to figure out laws and regulations and restrictions around it. We need to be able to embrace it. This means the traditional housing block. I don't think it's going to go away. However, it's going to change. And we all need to be on the forefront of it as opposed to struggling and pushing back on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I want to challenge one of your points. Nobody needs a drill. They need a hole. Okay.
That, if you take anything out of this session, there you go. Can someone please hashtag that one?
Right. Well, hey, I've got a good question I think applies to everyone here. Millennials are embracing the shared economy and Airbnb and alternative accommodations. Do you see that changing? Do you see them embracing hotel brands when they grow up? Or do you see this as the wave of the future and it's, as the millennials mature, they'll be dominating that market?
I'll go first. Everybody grows up. I think one of the things that is universal is that nobody in their 30s wants to be doing what they were doing in their 20s. And that's been universal for a long time. Now, with respect to the sharing economy and how Airbnb plays in that, they came about because what they really were was incredibly low-cost travel in more places. One of the reasons they got started in the United States, and they dominated, they really dominated because they brought European travelers to the United States. What was missing in the United States when Airbnb was coming up? When they were shared rooms. Remember, rooms were their first thing. That was because there was no hostel infrastructure in the United States. There is a hostel infrastructure in Europe and Asia and Australasia. So you didn't have something that they needed. They have aged through that. Airbnb had to evolve. As they evolved, those folks didn't want to stay in rooms anymore. They wanted to stay in whole apartments if they could. They wanted the entire thing to themselves. So the mix moved on. I think if Airbnb and HomeAway will continue to just evolve up market, and they will serve a very large market. It does open the opportunities for niches where people can serve, you've seen several people try to do that already with One Fine Stay, trying to be at a very high end of a vacation rental space. You have couch surfing still, in whatever incarnation of its life it's in right now, trying to do the low end. You have the hostels in EU completely changing the way the major chains of hostels work and making them much more community oriented, much more social, so that they can provide something that you can get at a hostel that you can't get you're not going to get in a 40-year-old guy's back bedroom. What the experience you're going to get as a teenager in a cool hostel in Berlin. So people are evolving. Yes, they will. I think they're part of the landscape. They're not going to go away. The main thing that people are looking at is it's got to be authentic, it's got to be real, and I don't see this generation losing its zeal to do something that nobody else has done before.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. In fact, when Facebook first started, everybody said, "Oh, it's just for young people," and then, as time went on, now, the older generation is actually the fastest, social media, fastest growing social media user group there is. So I actually think the emergence of Airbnb and similar type models just made the idea of renting a home, which was originally called vacation rental, much more mainstream. And I think it's going to continue to be more pervasive among travelers. I actually think it's just going to become another form of travel, right? Sometimes you might want to stay in a hotel. Sometimes you might want a B&B, right? And sometimes you might want an Airbnb or a vacation rental. And I think to your point, Carl, I think the millennials, as they get older, of course they will have different needs and their tastes will grow more sophisticated. But I also think that the sharing economy is also going to evolve in order to cater to those more sophisticated needs as the younger generations grow. So,
And I feel like the millennials, as they age and as they get older, they are not going to want to sacrifice things like convenience. Right now, by and large, if you're going to a conference and you're going to stay at an Airbnb, it's probably going to be less convenient for you. It might save you some money, and you might be able to get in on it with a number of people. But millennials, as they grow and as they are less budget conscious, truly staying in the hotel block and staying in the hotel where the event is going and the elevator that you can take from the event to your room is a convenience that some people are just going to be willing to pay for.
I'm curious, by show of hands, if there's anyone in the room that has booked an Airbnb for this event. One,
there are a
One.
couple out there.
Two?
three.
I see
Wow,
5 or 6.
yeah, that's great.
So the room block is not dead, apparently.
Right, right.
I will just add this one point. I've spoken to a lot of people that like Airbnb because of the privacy. So there are certain people that now have realized, you know what? I don't like staying in a hotel anymore because I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to have to get out of my car and have someone whisk my bag away and then have to wait an hour for it to get to my room. I want to take it myself, and I don't want to have a knock on my door, when I'm in my pajamas and suddenly have to rush and get ready to find out what this person needs. And I just want to be left alone, and I think Airbnb caters to that type of audience as well.
Hey, we're running a little short on time, but are there any comments or questions from the audience? We'd love to hear.
I
No?
don't see one.
Okay,
Oh, back
There's
there.
one way down there.
okay. One way back there.
Shout.
Run, Greg.
Thanks, Greg. Hi, it's Serena from Meeting Max. I have a question. There was a couple of mentions about what's on the forefront of possible sharing economy, areas of pet vacations and whatnot. Just wondering if there's any insight about the airline industry or the travel industry when it comes to flights. We're all bound by those really strict cancellation policies and the high fees. So just wondering if you know of anything about how we can make sharing economy affect our travel and air.
I'll just quickly touch on a company called Air Mule. And Air Mule is an organization that realizes that when you fly internationally, you're often allowed to bring 2 pieces of luggage. A lot of people don't bring 2 pieces of luggage. Air Mule is in business to help you monetize that second piece of luggage that you are not utilizing with the airline. I know the first question is okay, mule, we get what you could be. But apparently, so the packages have already been TSA pre-checked. So it's a safe package. When you go to the counter and they say, have you packed all your bags? You say, no, I'm not. I have not packed this package. Here's the TSA pre-check on it. But there's an interesting way about, again, monetizing an underutilized asset. This is an asset of being allowed to bring 2 packages or two suitcases on where you're not, and you only bring 1.
There are also some companies that are working on developing open leg technology. If you fly private, you pay for a round trip. But if you're only flying one direction, that plane has to come back. So they're trying to develop, and there are lots of regulations to follow with the FAA, ways to book and monetize that return trip, which I think is brilliant.
We were also talking at lunch about a company that allows you to rent people's cars. So you don't want to rent from Hertz or Avis, well, there's a website, I can't remember what it's called now, but you can go and, in fact, if you have a car that's laying idle in your driveway or an extra one, you can have people rent your car while they're in town, and you can monetize that.
Okay, I guess that's it. I want to thank everybody for participating in the panel. And